Right now, berthed at the Port of Auckland, the Paranagu Express, carrying tons of radioactive uranium ore, is sitting there. Proof of our support for the international nuclear cycle, mocking our nuclear-free status. This ship and the others who will be transshipping through our ports almost weekly undermine our proud nuclear-free history and the blood, sweat and tears of thousands of Kiwis who in the 80s fought to entrench our nuclear-free status on the world stage. Radioactive uranium ore is more than Australian dirt, as Nick Smith alleges. This is a radioactive material that puts our people at risk, harms Australians, damages the environment and is possibly involved in the most egregious industries of all, the nuclear weapons industry. Sir, we need an urgent moratorium on these shipments, but what does the government say to Kiwis? Let them eat yellow cake. Mr. Speaker, earlier this year, Irma decided to routinely transship uranium ore stored in 44-gallon drums through the ports of Auckland, Tauranga, Napier and Nelson from Australia en route to various nations. It's a radioactive powder that gets turned into either fuel rods or enriched uranium. The risks locally are probably smaller than, say, from a fuel oil tanker or the plutonium shipments in the Tasman Sea, which I alerted the House to last week. But the risks are there and the risks are genuine. Accidents do happen, especially at sea. Fires can rage for days and cargo can move around on board, splitting open containers. Our ports and our port workers aren't equipped for radioactive spills. Regardless of the local risks, New Zealand shouldn't be part of and support the nuclear chain and allow the raw materials needed for nuclear generation because of the huge impact uranium mining has on the Australian environment, their communities and their workers. Doctors say that 30 to 50% of men who have worked in the uranium mines in Australia have developed lung cancers and have died. If they wear respirators, it makes no difference because the radon gas still gets through even if the powder doesn't. Much of the darker side of the uranium mining in Australia is left unsaid as employees in the larger businesses are forced to sign non-disclosure clauses before they start work. There are many stories of spills, but employers are too intimidated to go on the record. Uranium mining is environmentally destructive. For every tonne of uranium produced, hundreds of tonnes of radioactive and toxic wastes or tailings are left behind. South Australia's Olympic Dam, for example, consumes 33 million litres of water every day and is one of the largest users in that dry country. The Electrical Trades Union in Queensland has recently banned its members from working in the uranium mines or in the nuclear industry. Until it can be proved that none of this uranium in our port is contributing to nuclear weapons, we need a moratorium. The Australian government says that its uranium is used only for peaceful purposes. However, this has been challenged repeatedly. Australia cannot and will not guarantee that its uranium won't be turned into nuclear weapons or depleted uranium, and nor does the Australian Nuclear Safeguards Office keep track of Australian uranium. The International Atomic Energy Agency suffers from a want of funds and is prevented from making spot inspections. Australia has sold to non-proliferation treaty members such as Taiwan. Even when Australia does sell to non-proliferation member states, there is no way of tracking the on-selling to non-members. As I tabled in this House last week, a report from Energy Science, this illustrates Australian uranium enables countries to advance nuclear weapons by freeing up scarce domestic reserves. Australia sells its uranium to nuclear weapon states and purposefully closes its eyes to the uses of its uranium, and New Zealand should not be a link. While the weapons-grade link is murky and secretive, and we can't ascertain if or how many grams or kilos of Australian uranium has been turned into weapons, I can guarantee every single gram will be disposed of as waste and pose a hazard for millions of years. In the 1980s, New Zealand stood up and we spoke truth to power. We said no to nuclear weapons and no to nuclear-powered ships in our ports. Yet at the same time, we continued allowing uranium to transship through our ports, which we only found out recently, seemingly without any officials or elected representatives being aware. This trade has been conducted behind closed doors like so much of the nuclear energy and weapons programs internationally. Why weren't the public consulted? We need an investigation into these issues. I'm hoping to bring before this House draft legislation to amend the New Zealand Nuclear Free Zone, Disarmament and Arms Control Act 1987 to prohibit New Zealand's role in the nuclear cycle, and I urge members to support this. Nuclear Free New Zealand is a proud part of our history. We need to stay nuclear free.
Chris Tremaine.